We have an update in a sick case of a babysitter accused of sexually assaulting a toddler. Here is Victoria Cranmer in a New Jersey courtroom this week. Investigators say she allegedly kept a video of the awful incident on her phone, and she was laughing as she took it. I will warn you, the details of this story are not easy to hear, and yet there are now questions about whether a plea deal is a possibility. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. A judge overseeing this case of this babysitter now in jail for just a horrific crime. You just can't imagine it if all of this is true. The judge called the case troubling at a last court hearing. And based on what we've been told about this case, troubling may be a massive understatement. Now, this is Victoria Cranmer, the babysitter we're talking about, in a New Jersey courtroom this week. She did not appear to show much emotion as she stood for a hearing, and it only lasted a couple of minutes. She has been in the Ocean County Jail since her arrest last month. And even though this hearing was brief, there was a line that has caught people's attention about the possibility that this case could end in a plea deal. Now, we'll get to that in just a moment, but I want to bring you up to speed on what authorities say happened and how we got to this point. Again, I'm going to warn you, I can't warn you enough about how disturbing the details are to this story. But let's go back to when this investigation started, which was on May 20th. And that is when the New Jersey Division of Child Protection and Permanency contacted police in Little Egg Harbor, New Jersey, which they're a group that investigates concerns about child abuse and neglect in New Jersey. A woman is identified in court records only as Miss P, and she was the one who allegedly came forward claiming that she found this very disturbing video on Victoria Cranmer's phone, specifically on her Snapchat. And she said that video showed Cranmer, a babysitter, sexually abusing a child so young they were still in diapers.
The victim is a 2-year-old juvenile.
Now, that is video from a previous court hearing per the Asbury Park Press. Cranmer reportedly lived with Miss P and her child for about 3 months. During Cranmer's stay, Miss P bought her a phone, and this phone was a birthday present according to court records. Now, the relationship between Cranmer and Miss P seems to have gone south. Court records state that Miss P ordered Cranmer to leave the home because she was having issues with her mental health. We don't really know much more about that at this point. And not only did Miss P order Cranmer out of the house, she said she wanted the phone back. And when she got the phone back, that phone did not have a passcode on it. So court documents show Miss P goes into the phone and finds the kind of video saved to Cranmer's Snapchat, allegedly, that would forever be seared into your mind.
One of those videos was a 14-second video clip taken while inside the bathroom at the child's residence. The video showed the defendant naked from at least the waist down, sitting on the toilet, while the 2-year-old juvenile stood next to the defendant.
Prosecutors say Cranmer is heard on this video laughing as the young boy, frankly a toddler, touched her private area. Now, that's according to court records. Not only did Miss P know that it was Cranmer, she says, because of some unique tattoos that Cranmer has on her body, but she also realized where this video was allegedly shot: the house of a woman who Cranmer babysat for. The victim's mom has been identified as Miss H in court records, and she said that she knew something was wrong. She didn't even know about the video at that point, but she noticed something was wrong because her son stopped liking the bath, and he was just acting differently after he spent time with Cranmer. Now, Cranmer allegedly bathed with the boy herself, according to court records. Now, the video in question is 14 seconds long, and it was allegedly taken on May 6th. This investigation started on May 20th. Then the arrest of Victoria Cranmer didn't happen until July 8th. Police say they discovered additional videos on her phone of her and the child, but it is unclear what those videos show. Cranmer was arrested and charged with sexual assault on a child, endangering the welfare of a child, manufacturing child sexual abuse material, and possession of child sex abuse material. Shockingly, at a previous court hearing, Cranmer's defense actually tried to downplay the video, and this is a quote that reportedly came out of that hearing, and you can see why it was such a controversial thing for a lawyer to say. Quote, anyone who has spent time caring for young children understands that children often have little appreciation for personal space or privacy. Young children routinely follow parents or caregivers into bathrooms, touch things, ask questions, are curious, and fail to recognize ordinary social boundaries. That was a public defender telling the court. She also reportedly said this about her client allegedly recording the incident. Quote, children often engage in funny, spontaneous, or strange behavior that adults record because the moment's memorable or humorous. This is the defense attorney. The video has been blown out of proportion, that public defender says. Now, there are a lot of people criticizing those statements because it really sounds like she's victim blaming for what happened. Now, we haven't seen this video. We don't know if it's been blown out of proportion, but it's hard to imagine at least the contents of it, that it would be blown out of proportion, right? Well, the judge had this to say. The judge called it bizarre. Not bizarre because the child went with Cranmer into the bathroom. The judge said it was bizarre because Cranmer allegedly did nothing to stop the toddler from touching her private area. And she reportedly laughed, she giggled, and recorded this video, then saved it. The judge said this, quote, I find it to be troubling. There wasn't any attempt to stop the child from touching her in the pubic area. Now, here's what we know about Victoria Cranmer. We know that she was very active on social media, and she wasn't afraid to lay out what she says, or at least what sounds like a pretty traumatic childhood. On TikTok, she wrote that her dad died on Christmas when she was 13. She then says she was taken away from her parents when she was 11, and she had to move 36 times as a kid, and she was in therapy by age 10. We're not bringing this up for, any sense of sympathy, but as we're trying to understand how someone gets in the situation she is, you have to look at their past. Now, as far as any kind of criminal record, we did find that Cranmer was once arrested for DUI back in 2023. This is body cam video of that incident, March of 2023.
I don't know what happened. I got hit at a traffic light. It was like a green light go, and then I don't know what happened. My mom is coming.
Okay. All right. Hey, is everything okay? Or you're not injured or anything? All right, it's okay. Just take a deep breath. It's all right.
I can't. I don't live away. I don't live around here. I live an hour away, and that's why I'm like.
We're not sure if that house vehicle on mass is involved.
Look, we don't have to tell your mom anything. All right, but here's the deal. You're gonna be placed under arrest for driving while intoxicated. Okay? I have to. All right, this is our job.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay? We're not have to explain anything to your mom.
I can't.
I'm gonna give you a second to catch your breath. Okay? All right, just breathe. Okay? A couple nice deep breaths. All right, and we're gonna get through this. Okay? Okay? You all right? All right, do me a favor. Just face this officer behind you. All right, can you just put both your hands on top of your head for me?
I can't. This is just a lot.
It's okay.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Can I just talk to you for a second?
Nope. No. I'll talk to you when we get there. All right. Don't worry.
Am I going to be okay?
You're going home about an hour. Okay? Not to worry. Yeah, like Officer said, we know you're going through a lot. No, don't be sorry. We'll make sure that you're okay.
Victoria, do you have anything? You're gonna sit back here. Do you have anything in your pockets?
I just want to go. I just want my car to go.
Look.
Cranmer said she had been drinking at a friend's funeral earlier that day. She then got into a car accident, and that is when police were called. Now, obviously, that case is unrelated and far less serious, frankly, than the charges that she's now facing. Here is Cranmer again in court this week. Let's get to the latest. Now, even though her hearing, it was brief, it does appear that prosecutors are potentially working with the defense on a plea deal.
Mr. King, have you had a chance to receive discovery?
Judge, I have not received any discovery yet.
No offer at this time, Judge. Certainly, I would ask that we bring this back for another EDC. The state does anticipate extending a pre-indictment offer in this matter, so if we could have maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and certainly I'll get all discovery to counsel in the meantime.
Now, it's unclear what a deal might look like. You heard the prosecutor say an offer has not been made. If found guilty, Cranmer will have to register as a sex offender for life, according to New Jersey law. She is also facing a stiff prison sentence possibility. The sex assault and manufacturing CSAM charges both carry 5 to 10-year prison terms. Her other charges would carry up to 5-year prison terms. That's per the Asbury Park Press. Her next hearing is set for August 17th. Joining us now once again to talk about this case is criminal defense attorney Eric Faddis, who's also a former sex crimes prosecutor. The timing of this case, she was arrested, I believe it was either June or July, and then here we are in August, and she's already, it seems like, at least from this very brief court appearance, that there's conversations of a plea deal. What do you make of the timing of that?
Well, Chris, the wheels of justice turn rather slowly in most jurisdictions in America. So the fact that it's been a significant amount of time since she was charged is not surprising to me at all. This would really be the time frame within which the DA and the defense attorney would probably get together and begin having discussions about, hey, is there a way to resolve this that we all can live with? And I imagine those discussions are ongoing.
Does that necessarily mean that they're already talking about it? And I know in this last hearing, the judge was like, is there an offer? And the prosecution said no. Even the idea that it's even being mentioned, like what could that mean for a time frame of when a deal goes in place? Like what's that look like?
You know, it'd be unusual, Chris, for a DA to state in open court, even that there might be a plea deal if no such plea deal was being considered. So what it tells me is that they're at least contemplating, hey, is there a way to resolve this short of trial? And if so, what could that look like? And so usually that's, starts with phone calls between the defense attorney and the DA. You talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the case. You talk about what justice requires, both for the public and for the accused. And so, that is kind of a hard path to navigate at times, especially in a case with allegations like these.
Yeah. And, you hear plea deal and in some cases, plea deals can still come with stiff prison sentences, or in this case, we're talking about the possibility of being a registered sex offender for Victoria Cranmer. But in a case like this, with what we know at this point, and I'm not saying like you can predict what a plea deal would actually look like in this case, but the idea that she could get out of this without having prison time or something like that. I mean, like, what would be your gut looking at what a possible, if you were a prosecutor on this case, like what a possible plea deal could look like for this suspect?
Sure. So when you're a prosecutor on a sex case, one thing you really have to keep front of mind is how provable is the case? How provable are the charges and the elements within those charges? With respect to these charges, as grotesque as it sounds, the DA has to prove that this conduct was sexual in nature. And there's a bit of a dispute regarding that, especially from defense. And so the DA is processing that. They're saying, hey, if I take this to trial, I might lose on this specific element. And so is there a way to sort of cover my exposure, but also gain justice in the case? What could that look like? I wouldn't be surprised, Chris, if a person with very limited criminal history in a case where the legal elements are credibly disputed, that could result in time served. She could get out of jail quickly and be on probation. Now, will she have the sex offender registration requirement? Will there be in-home detention or even jail on the back end? Those things are possibilities as well.
Yeah, and from the previous court hearing, you saw the defense kind of trying to make this argument of like, oh, kids play around, and then the judge even said like they found it bizarre, disturbing that they believe she didn't do anything to stop it. I mean, it's just it's a disturbing case, so it's hard to like kind of get into the nitty gritty of. Nor would we probably want to. We know that she is facing CSAM charges. And in many different cases, we see plea deals when it comes to child sexual abuse material. Why is that?
I think the reason that is in a lot of cases is because they are not terribly defensible. Look, if you have an item of explicit material regarding a child on your device, there are not a ton of defenses to be like, oh, somebody else put that there. I had no idea that was on there, especially when we're talking about multiple counts and things like that. So oftentimes the DA has a lot of leverage to say, hey, it's going to be a gajillion times worse at trial. You're going to get more incarceration. How about we agree to some plea offer and avoid all of that? And so that wouldn't be surprising. But here, however, the material is not, some commercially generated material from some, gross criminal who made it. Instead, this is a video from a phone that depicts something that some might say is sexual in nature, but others might say is not.
Well, and that's the question, right? I mean, I don't want to see the video, to be honest, but like, you hear of what it was, and, it's very disturbing. But then at the same time, like, you have the defense saying like, oh, how kids like play around. What is the bar, I guess, for something? Because, you think of people like playing with young people, young toddlers, and, your kids are taking baths or something. And then it's like, when does it get to the bar though, where you were talking about child sexual abuse material?
Right? I mean, really, the threshold is that sexual component. For example, there have been paintings in the past depicting nudity of underage people, and it was determined to not be sexual in nature. So there is such content that can be non-sexual. On the other hand, you got to look at what's depicted in that video, and I won't go into the details, but that's really going to be the turning point. Was there something that was sexual in nature? And the DA is a bit handcuffed in this case because they cannot ask this toddler about what was going on in their head or how they interpreted this or what they were feeling at the time. And that's information you usually want to have as a prosecutor to prove that sexuality component. And that could be challenging in a case like this.
And then when it comes to the alleged victim in this case, and then, his mom is identified as Miss H in court records, then you have this other person in court records identified as Miss P. As a prosecutor on a case like this, I mean, if you feel strongly that you watch this video, this is child sexual abuse material, you feel like this is a defendant who's guilty, and I don't know how the prosecutor feels about it, but then say you talk to a victim's family and they just want this thing to go away. They feel like, hey, this is too much. They don't want to go into a trial. They don't want to do that. Like, how do you balance that part of it where, even if you strongly as the prosecutor feel like this is something you need to take to the end?
Chris, in most states, the prosecutor is required to take into consideration the victim's family's wishes with respect to the case. Now, the prosecutor doesn't have to follow those every time, but they are required to consider them. And so there is often a tension, especially you look at domestic violence cases, you look at a cycle of violence, you look at the alleged victim who might at one point in the case say, hey, look, this was a big misunderstanding. I rely on this person. I depend on them. I don't want them to get in trouble. Why don't you just dismiss the case? And as the prosecutor, you got to say, hey, could that give rise to a risk later on of some criminality, of some repeat offender type of situation? So all these things are swirling in your head as a DA, and you try to do right by the victim's family, do right by the community, and on top of that, do right by the accused. You're not there to, unduly harm somebody who's been accused of something terrible. And so balancing all of those things can be very difficult.
And, some of these statements, this is from the previous court appearance where you have the public defender at the time for Victoria Cranmer saying like, hey, kids are curious, kids do things, if you're, a guardian or a babysitter, you might take video of a child doing something funny and save that. And, clearly from what's been accused, this is not, video of just a kid playing or something like that, according to what's been alleged in court records. But you have a statement like that and you'll look at the comments and everybody's saying that, this defense attorney, this is victim blaming. This is, and you do read what this public defender said, and like you wince a bit, based on what's been going on. Like as a defense attorney, like how do you balance the arguments you're going to make where that in defending somebody, there are going to be those criticisms of victim blaming at time, but you have to do right by your client no matter what they're accused of?
It's a tough situation to be in, Chris. You've got to deal with some very uncomfortable subject matter, and you've got to raise at times some very uncomfortable questions because you have a duty under the Constitution to provide the best legal services for your client, and that includes whether they are guilty or not. You have to still subject the government's case to scrutiny. You have to pick out weaknesses. You have to provide alternative, plausible explanations and interpretations of these actions and say, hey, can you guys rule this out? Can you really say it wasn't something innocent? And sometimes you might get some flack for raising those arguments, but that's sort of the nature of the beast when it comes to criminal defense.
There are a lot of cases. I mean, we unfortunately, and we'll talk about, sex crimes cases often. And a lot of times I'm stunned that defendants are able to get out on bond. And it's all depending on different states. Victoria Cranmer, though, doesn't seem like she has an extensive criminal history. There's like a DUI in 2023. She's apparently had, just based off court records, some mental health issues, but like she's being held without bond in this case. Are you surprised? And there are a lot of people that will hear what this video was and would say that they aren't surprised whatsoever. I just think we see so many cases where people are at least granted the opportunity to be out as their case goes forward. But she's been in the Ocean County Jail ever since her arrest. Does that surprise you that she has been held to no bond in this case?
A little bit, Chris. I mean, I've seen cases with a lot more alleged child exploitative material
Yeah.
that was on devices. It's pretty indisputable that it's on there and what it is. And those folks were out on bond. And so this one, I think one thing that kind of sets it apart, however, is the alleged direct contact that Victoria had with this alleged toddler victim. And so it's not as if she was getting things off the internet or having things sent to her. That's one thing, and it can be absolutely egregious. But another thing is when you are a direct participant in what the government may be considering child sex assault, that ups the ante a little bit. And so I can understand why a judge was more cautious on her bond because of how this case is set apart from other cases.
And, if you're a defense attorney on this case and you know that prosecutors have, and apparently there may be some sort of plea deal being worked out, but prosecutors have this video and there's a possibility, okay, if we're going to take this to trial, even as a defense attorney, you feel firmly, maybe you've seen the video, you feel like she's innocent. Like, how do you proceed knowing that a prosecutor on day one of a trial could just press play to the jury and they would have to watch this 14-second video that we've heard about, and that could be incredibly damning evidence for your client?
You're going to have some very difficult conversations during jury selection before that video is played with these potential jurors. And you're going to have to try to give them a frame through which they're going to view evidence that is open, that is perhaps non-judgmental, that is saying, hey, reserve your judgment about this evidence until you hear the whole thing. In fact, the jury would be instructed on that at trial that, hey, this is one piece of evidence. There's a lot of other evidence, good and bad, potentially, in the case. And so to try to find jurors and sort of prime them for withholding that judgment, you're going to see some stuff that might be evocative. It might be inflammatory. And your job as a juror is to not draw a conclusion just based on one piece of evidence. You have to keep that open mind, including for defense's case, which will be later on in the trial. So trying to really impress that upon jurors would be paramount during jury selection.
And then what's the conversation like as a defense attorney? Like, say you're representing Victoria Cranmer and she is looking at several years in prison. She's looking at a lifetime sex offender registry. And, you're in these negotiations and like, it's easy on the outside to be like, okay, so like we can shave a couple years off here, a couple years off there in negotiation, but those are also like years of someone's life. How do you have, and even if your client feels like they're innocent, like, how do you deliver the news about how these negotiations are going and what the possibilities are about what a punishment may be? Maybe there is prison time. Maybe they get rid of it. You have to be a sex offender, which is, certainly leads to and in many cases, well-deserved challenges in life, but it's obviously something that's going to change the way you live for the rest of your life. How do you as a defense attorney kind of handle those conversations with somebody?
You've got to have a terribly frank discussion about that potential exposure. And that's your job. Your job isn't to like get all your clients to like you and to be a super popular guy. Your job is to convey the legal reality that your client is facing. And sometimes we're talking about years in a box in a very unhospitable environment, such as prison. Sometimes we're talking about the scarlet letter of being permanently branded as a sex offender in your community for the rest of your life. These are very high stakes. And so having those conversations can be difficult. Sometimes there are tears, sometimes there's anger and yelling. It really runs the gamut. But I think as a professional, you owe them a duty of service to be candid during those talks.
And, I've always just been interested to know, like, what's it like inside the room if you're a prosecutor or a defense attorney with the other side? Do you meet? I mean, what's that? Because, and I hate bringing up like Law and Order, but, everybody does, where it's like literally the plea negotiation in a 40-minute episode is like they write down a number on a piece of paper and like slide it across the desk. And like, I know that's not actually how it works. Like in any case, not just like a disturbing one we're talking about here, but like, what is that meeting? Like, you got a meeting at 1:00 with prosecutors or defense attorney and you meet in a room, like what happens next?
Different attorneys handle it differently. Some shoot from the hip. They'll go into court. They'll take the prosecutor aside for a few minutes and see what they can possibly broker in terms of resolution. I'm a little bit more contemplative. I'm a little bit more methodical. I develop what's called a mitigation packet, which is a bulk of information favorable to the client, character letters, professional educational achievements, and also highlighting the potential weaknesses in the case, whether that's provability, whether it's constitutional issues. And then I say, hey, these are the problems. This is our counter proposal to your plea offer. And then you kind of go back and forth. I do it in writing. Some folks prefer to do it over the phone or in person. And it really depends in part, too, on the other side. You got to read the room. You got to read your audience, and you got to adjust your approach accordingly.
Yeah. And, that's a fascinating part of it, of what everybody does. I mean, often for us on the outside, we see kind of the final results when you hear about a plea deal. We'll see if there's a plea deal in this case involving Victoria Cranmer. Certainly incredibly disturbing allegations that she is facing. Eric Faddis, criminal defense attorney, thank you as always for being with us here on Law and Crime. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.